Even though Stephen Crane only lived a short time in the 19th century, he was one of the most influential journalists and writers of that period. Now, he was the youngest of 14 children. His father died when he was 9. He moved to New York in 1890 after 2 years of college, and he lived in a Bowery boarding house while freelancing. And that is what we read about from the Art of Fact, the experiment in misery was when he was there. Now, many of you probably have read the Red Badge of Courage about the Civil War, and what's interesting about that is that Stephen Crane didn't cover the Civil War. He had never seen war, but the Red Badge of Courage stands as one of the finest books about the Civil War. In 1893, he wrote a book, Maggie, a Girl on the Street, which was about a young woman who was abused as a young girl, went into prostitution, and ultimately committed suicide. He published the book under a pseudonym and at his own expense, but it basically, started his career. It left him to struggle as a poor and essentially unknown freelance journalist, but then he was befriended by an influential critic and author, William Dean Howells. His fame was from the Red Badge of Courage and his first book of poems, The Black Riders. The Red Badge of Courage is a study of a young soldier trying to find what his life is about in the midst of warfare. Henry Fleming, the hero, survives his fear, his cowardice, his egotism to discover courage and humility and even wisdom during the Civil War, during one particular battle. And as I mentioned, Crane actually had never seen war at that time, but he decided that what he wanted to do is to go off and learn about war, and so he went to Cuba in 1897, just before the outbreak of the Spanish-American War. And while he was going there, he was traveling on a boat, the Commodore, and it sank, and he finally rowed to shore with a small group, the captain, the cook, and an oiler. And the result was one of the world's greatest short stories called The Open Boat, really a fine piece of work. He went to Greece to report on the Greco-Turkish War for the New York Journal for Hearst. And then he covered the Spanish-American War in Cuba, and first for the New York World, which was Hearst, and then the New York World, which was Pulitzer, and then for the New York Journal for Hearst, and wrote some fine pieces on war. He suffered from tuberculosis and malaria and died at a young age, just 30 years old in 1900. A fine writer and an excellent choice to take a look at, particularly description in how he writes his journalism and his other stories. So that's all for today, and we'll see you online.